Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by thanking the England football team for everything they've given this country over the last 6 weeks. I'm so proud of this young, diverse and humble team and everything that it represents. Mr. Speaker, they're the very best of modern Britain, everything that I know this country can be. Does the Prime Minister think that it was wrong to criticise the England team's decision to oppose racism by taking the knee as gesture politics? Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, that just won't wash, and it rings hollow. On the 7th, remind the Prime Minister and the House, on the 7th of June, the Prime Minister's spokesperson said this: on taking the knee, specifically, the Prime Minister is more focused on actions rather than gestures. On the 14th of June, the Home Secretary said, I just don't support people participating in that type of gesture politics. The Conservative MP for Bassetlaw called it a ridiculous, empty gesture. So there's no point of pretending that these things weren't said. The England footballer, Tyrone Mings, said that Labour Party member I hear shouted out. Is that really the response? Is that it? Tyrone Mings said, and the House might want to listen, he said this: labelling anti-racism messages as gesture politics served to stoke the fire of racism and hatred. Prime Minister, they're powerful words from someone who has himself been subjected to racist abuse. He's right, isn't he? Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I totally condemn all racism, including that directed at the Home Secretary. But she's got this wrong. The whole country knows it. His own MPs know it. In the last few days, everybody has seen England's black players have been the targets of disgusting racist abuse following Sunday's match. Disgusting. And this is really simple, Mr. Speaker. Either the Prime Minister is with the England players in their stand against racism, or he can defend his own record, those of his ministers and some of his MPs. But he can't have it both ways. So can he tell the House, does he now regret failing to condemn those who booed England players for standing up to racism, yes or no? Mr. Speaker, the online harms bill has been promised for 3 years. I'm not sure a 15-minute chat at a garden party moves things forward that significantly. But I want to take the Prime Minister up on what he said about being absolutely clear, because here I have the headline, Mr. Speaker: Boris Johnson refuses to condemn fans booing England taking the knee. That's the story, that's the headline, June the 6th. Boris Johnson refuses to condemn fans booing England taking the knee. That's absolutely clear. It's not quite what the Prime Minister is implying today. It goes on to quote the Prime Minister's spokesperson, saying that the Prime Minister fully respects the rights of those who choose to make their feelings known. This is about booing. Fully respects their rights. And the Home Secretary said that booing was a choice for them, quite frankly. So no condemnation there, no absolute clarity there, Mr. Speaker. When senior government ministers and Conservative MPs defend the booing of an anti-racist message, who do they think they're defending, Prime Minister, and why are they defending it? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister isn't kidding anyone in this House, he's not kidding the public, and he's not even kidding his own MPs. Let me quote the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moor View. Conservative MP: the painful truth, says the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moor View, is that Tyrone Mings is completely right. I am very uncomfortable, he says, with the position we Conservatives are needlessly forcing ourselves into. So, Prime Minister, behind you they don't believe you, and neither do we. Mr. Speaker, we can all see what's happened here. The government has been trying to stoke a culture war, and they've realised they're on the wrong side. And now they hope that nobody's noticed. Why else would a Conservative MP boast that he's not watching his own team? Why else would another Conservative MP say that Marcus Rashford spends too much time playing politics when he's actually trying to feed children that the government won't? And why will the Prime Minister refuse time and time again, even now, to condemn those who boo our players for standing up against racism? Mr. Speaker, what is it that this England team symbolises that this Conservative Party is so afraid of? He doesn't want to engage in a culture war and point scoring. Give me a break. Football's a game. Racism isn't, Prime Minister. That's why many of us have been involved in the charity Show Racism the Red Card for years. But far from giving racism the red card, the Prime Minister gave it the green light. And I'll tell you the worst kind of gesture politics, Mr Speaker, putting an England shirt on over a shirt and tie whilst not condemning those booing is the worst kind of gesture. Mr Speaker, I want to ask the Prime Minister finally about the reported amnesty for crimes committed during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I worked in Northern Ireland for 6 years with the Policing Board and the police. I've also prosecuted terrorists as the Director of Public Prosecutions, so I know how difficult and how sensitive this is. But a blanket amnesty, including for terrorists, is plain wrong. I was in Northern Ireland last week, and it's absolutely clear that the government's amnesty is not supported by the political parties in Northern Ireland, and it's not supported by victims groups. Last Thursday, I spoke to victims of terrorism at the Wave Trauma Centre in North Belfast. Mr Speaker, they haven't even been properly consulted on this proposal. If things are to move forward in Northern Ireland, any discussion has to start with the victims. Politicians in London can't simply draw a line under terrorism and other crimes and then force it on those most affected. The Prime Minister looks up, so let him look up and let him hear. Because I want to quote Julie Hambleton, Prime Minister. Her sister Maxine was among the 21 people killed by the IRA in the Birmingham pub bombings. So that's Julie Hambleton, Prime Minister. She says, tell me, Prime Minister, if one of your loved ones was blown up beyond recognition, where you were only able to identify your son or daughter by their fingernails, would you be so quick to grant their murderers an amnesty and propose such obscene legislation? What does the Prime Minister have to say to Julie, and she's listening, and other victims like her?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let me begin by congratulating the England team for reaching the final, an incredible achievement. But the tragedy of the tournament was the undercurrent of racism that was ultimately targeted at 3 young men, Rashford, Sancho and Saka. Mr Speaker, wherever there is racism, it falls on all of us to face it down and to call it out. And it is shameful that it took until last night for the Prime Minister to meet with the main social media companies and finally wake up to the fact that those who publish and promote vile racist online abuse need to be faced down and sanctioned. So, can the Prime Minister tell us what sanctions he thinks would be appropriate for someone who publishes racist content? And it is shocking even to have to say this out loud, describing Africans as flag-waving piccaninnies with watermelon smiles. You know, still no contrition, still no apology, and Mr Speaker, the truth is that the Tory party doesn't sanction those who publish that kind of racist content. They promote them to be Prime Minister. The legacy of this Prime Minister's dog whistling has followed him into 10 Downing Street, and it is now at the heart of this Tory government. As the England international Tyrone Mings has so powerfully stated, this government doesn't get to stoke the fires of racism and pretend to be disgusted when it happens. They don't get to condemn the racism of others, but deny that the racism that they have even provoked. In March, this UK government's own report on racism, the Sewell report, said that there was no systemic problem in the UK. I think the England men's football team would beg to differ. After the shocking racism on show over the last week, does the Prime Minister still stand by his government's belief that systemic racism is not a problem that exists in the United Kingdom?